This will either be the start of an incredible series or the beginning of a very failed attempt that y'all are going to humor us for a few weeks on.
No,
Um,
I think you're onto something. I think you're onto something. So, Murman, why don't you start with the Genesis, and then we'll just grab one off the top, and we'll go from
yeah.
there.
Okay. So Leff and I were texting about the struggles that everybody is having in their work, and it's not necessarily with validate. Like we talked a lot in 2023 about how 2023 was the year where the chickens came home to roost of, are you delivering value as an agilist, right? It doesn't matter what your role is. You can put your role in there. 2023 is the year that the chickens came home to roost, and it's like, are you delivering value or not? Because if you're not, your rate's not valuable anymore, too high, and we don't have room to pay for your role anymore. And so we started discussing like, where did this come from? Where did these happen? And I will give Leff a large majority of the credit for this. By the way, Leff and Hrcsko, if you haven't heard their voices already, they're here with me. We're here to discuss um, the original sins of agile transformations. And so we started throwing these ideas out. Maybe that was a sin and this is a sin. And Hrcsko was like, why don't we just stick to the seven deadlies? And for lack of a better way to put it, I mean, like, Leff, is there anything else of the genesis of our conversation that when we were talking about it that I missed?
No, I think we were just kind of bantering back and forth and just kind of it popped in. And I think it was something that you said, Jay, or maybe it wasn't. I don't
I
know.
I definitely got involved in the conversation.
Yeah.
And it was something around. So I think Murman, you and Leff were going back and forth, and you said, "What about the idea of using sin?" And well, and also let's back up a little bit further. The genesis of that conversation also came from the fact that you nailed it, Murman. We've reached an inflection point in our industry where everybody is starting to man stares into the abyss, and the abyss stares back, and we've reached that inflection in our industry where, like you said, the question of value has come up. The question of, are we delivering value? Do people have the right expectations of what we can do? And somehow the conversation ping ponged around to, well, let's talk about the seven deadly sins. Let's pick a sin and go through each one in an episode. And let's talk about what are the sins that we tell ourselves? What are the sins that we tell our clients and each other? And lastly, what are the sins that we commit that we're again staring into the abyss and the abyss is staring back and we're not acknowledging that thing in the room.
Yeah, a lot of this was I was fortunate enough to get some training budget to take. There's he's been on the podcast before. A guy named Chris Lee does an immersion program for folks that do training and workshops, and he basically takes how do we teach teachers how to teach, and he's applied it to training in our industry. So I got to spend a whole week with him, and he said something that kind of unlocked a couple of doors for me mentally. This idea of, we say things, as he called them, trainer truths. Like, you believe them to be true, but all they are is just opinions that you just believe strongly in. That in training classes, we say these things out loud, and then all of a sudden they think people hear them as absolute truths when all they are trainer truths. I believe them to be true. And by me telling you that they're true, I'm telling a lie, or maybe not a lie, but a myth or a half truth, right? And so our industry has been, excuse me, has been, especially the last decade, we have said things either in workshops or meetings as consultants, leadership meetings, training sessions. We've all either received them or delivered them that are just things that we think are true, but aren't actually true. There's very few absolute truths. In fact, I don't know that there's any absolute truths, but we have presented things as absolute truths. That might be one of the original sins of it. And it can kind of fit into a lot of different categories. And so we're going to talk about things like so I guess we just need to pick one. Do y'all care which original sin we go
Just
after?
grab one. Just grab one.
Yeah. And I think before you pick one, right, while you're picking it, I think too is we started off with the word transformation. To me, the artery that spins off on that is just that. To me, you can't sell it, right?
Right.
So it's greed or gluttony, right? Is that kind of where we're getting into with a sin, right? We capitalize on dysfunction in a way that feels sinful, right? And I think we've all collected a lot of data from experience to say we can't support the lie, right? It
Right.
feels like a lie. It feels wrong. I feel conflicted as a person with some morals, right? Like it's not just a money grab. We actually truly care, and I think that's what led us into the coaching profession, right? Is the level of care. We do believe in the things that we deem opinion, right? So how has that also morphed into um, this sinful quality, right? Like, do we then become toxic because we can't support these sins? But I just thought I would toss that out there
Mhm.
too.
No, it's well said, Lef, and to be honest, again, it comes down to if you're hearing this and you're like guys, I hear you, but I have like there is something that when I do this, like either it's a practice or an event or a ceremony or a whatever, right? I've always done this and it's always worked. We're not saying that the things that you're doing don't work. What we're saying is that when you present something as always working or always being true, it's perpetuating this myth of we can solve any problem you have using these 4 pillars and 12 principles.
Right.
And
Right.
whether you believe in the 3-5-3 of Scrum or you believe in the 9 or 10 or however many safe principles there are, or XP and Kanban combined, or you're like, no, I have an evolved Scrumban sort of approach. Like none of those things. I'm not saying any of those things can't be helpful. We are not here to say the things you're doing are bad. What I'm saying is that when we perpetuate that something is always true and is never going to fail,
Mhm.
that is it's why I firmly believe we need to start with the original sin of pride.
Okay.
Pride is I believe if as I experience, I mean, I'm as being a member of the program team for Agile 2024, I see only submission. I see a lot of worthy ideas and interesting ideas coming my way every single day. And some of the struggles that I'm having with the submissions, and it's not that they won't be accepted, it's just pride is all over the place. This is a problem. I know how to solve it. Come join me and we'll fix the world, in 75 easy minutes or whatnot, right?
Yeah. Can I jump off that left before I
Go for
pass
it.
throw the baton to you? So I'm glad you picked actually a gluttony was the one I was really leaning towards because obviously
We'll
right
get
never
there.
no
We'll
it
get
never
there.
been a meal I couldn't miss. When I think about pride, right, especially in what we do, not the lies we tell other people, the lies we tell ourselves, the first thing I think of is Upton Sinclair and that quote where it is impossible to make someone understand something when their salary depends on them understanding the opposite, right?
Yes.
So we can put that on a six-sided die, and no matter who comes up on the die, names on the die, right, the stakeholder, the leader, the VP, the coach, the scrum master, the product owner. Our roles are dependent upon us understanding things and not understanding things. And the older I get, the more I think that the most important thing that any successful person is going to need in the future is the ability to navigate cognitive dissonance in their own heads, to be able to have two conflicting, completely opposite ideas and understand that they can work well together. When I think about pride, right, like if I write a book and my book says Jupiter is the center of the universe, right? I write a book and I say Jupiter is the center of the universe. My income is dependent upon me being an author, right? I don't have a job, and all I wrote is the book saying Jupiter is. I am never going to believe anything other than Jupiter is the center of the universe. I'm never going to, and it's not my fault. This is a glitch in our human OS. That is how I make my money, how I feed my family, pay my bills. You're never going to get me to change my mind. No
We
offense to anyone that we've come across that we work with, but we need to be you need to be realize that I'm sorry, but if you're a good coach, there are days you log off and you say to yourself, I can't believe I just shoveled that shit out the door. Like, I can't believe I just did that. Well, I got a bill to pay, right? But at the same time, I think we need to be honest with ourselves that we need to consistently challenge ourselves. We need to consistently, okay, well, this is what I think I know. Is that really right? And to your point, Murman, heuristics are great, but there's a difference between a heuristic and a grand proclamation. And a lot of the times we say, oh, well, you have to do it this way because I've seen it work 4 out of 4 times. And here comes the Nassim Taleb with the black swan, and he's waving. Because that 5th time, maybe it just goes completely sideways.
That's if you're lucky. If it's only 1 out of every 5. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you're lucky.
So,
yeah, go ahead, Leff.
Yeah, I want to agree wholeheartedly with everything you're both saying. I want to put a different lens on it and say that when I think of this kind of sinful quality, right, it's in a large enterprise corporate environment.
Right.
I think it's hard to, I think different kind of scale, right? At different scale, things happen differently, right? Like that's not a, revolutionary statement, I'm sure. But when it comes to pride, I think too, it's hard for being, and I don't love this term, but I'm going to use it, the change agent, to not have a level of pride walking in and saying, it's so easy. Why can't you just do this? This makes sense. Why are you doing that? Right? That makes no sense. Why can't we kind of move in this direction? Right. And you were talking about leadership and, starts at the top. Does it? Right. To me, is there pride at the top to admit that it's not working? Or is there too much pride to allow things to fail long enough to learn so we can move in a different direction? I think there's also that. It's almost like a stopping point. And and again, I don't want to go too far down this path, but I'm not sure if this is, I would love to see, and I'm not trying to piss off the audience, but I would love to see the gender difference, right? From a male leadership team to a female. Is there a difference when it comes to the adaptability, desire, and pride, right? There's a male quality with pride that
an ego and
genetic, right?
Yeah.
So would there be a difference or a nuance when it comes to this sin? Does sin evolve, change, morph when we have a gender difference? That could be a future kind of discussion, but I do think there's something there when it comes to pride and the inability to focus on doing something different in a meaningful way. Right? When you put finance into the equation, to me, finance is the biggest deadly sin there is. Greed. How do we balance this stuff on the books? So does pride prohibit us from getting into that, or, is that a blocker for that greed category? So
yeah,
I know I kind of took us all over the place with that.
No. The point you made about the large enterprise is a good for the future, for the rest of the sins we're going to discuss as well. Like, I think in 2024 we can successfully say we've moved past we're only talking about things that work for 1-2 pizza team building one backlog on one product by themselves, no dependencies, handoffs. Like, those days are gone. Like, so anything that we're talking about, like, all 3 of us have gigantic large enterprise experience under our belt. And so when we come at this, we're coming at this from like I'm not talking about the startup that I worked for where I had 1 team and it was 8 of us and we got left alone and we had an engaged client. Like, we're not, like, those days are, if you still have that, if you still get that, like, please, like,
God bless you.
Stop the episode. Turn this episode off. Lucky.
Yeah, turn this episode off. We're not going to offer you anything new.
Yeah, we are not going to help you because that's not the world that, at least in the U.S. For those of you across the pond, wherever the pond is, like, I don't, like, you all are welcome and part of welcome to be in this conversation as well. You may not experience this the way that we are. Like, unfortunately, we're 3 U.S. based white males that are experiencing the world through the lens that we have. I don't know, Leff.
So I'm gonna yes and that and say, so when I think about pride, right? To your point, right? The the two pizza small team, no dependencies, they own their own world. Like, God bless them. Was it prideful for us to ever think that this kind of counter revolutionary thinking, right? When we consider how enterprises are built, how leadership is structured, right? The makeup of the success stories, how people climb the ladder. Was it foolish pride to think we could ever apply this shit at scale? Was it foolish pride to say, hey, it works with 2 pizzas? How about 2,000 pizzas? It's the same, and somewhere Dave Snowden right now is listening to this episode, if we're lucky, and he's screaming at his head unit, right? Because this is his thing where it's not fractal in the sense that you can't just, oh, well, we do it here. We'll do it here, 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 every step of the ladder. Bang, it just works. And maybe that was one of our other original sins, convincing ourselves that, hey, if I do this for my team and it really works, I could do it for a team of teams. And that's where, for lack of a better scientific term, shit gets gnarly.
Yeah, I don't know. Where do you think it started?
No, I think, well, I think it started. I don't know, actually. I don't know. I think, why wouldn't we want to take something that's working and see if we can do it at scale? I think that's natural, right? Where I think we've missed the opportunity is trying to sell at scale, right? I keep going back just because from the consulting lens, right? Like I lived this life, Chris lived this life, Jay, you've lived this life. We just kind of know you can't, to be a hired gun to go in and do this work at scale is difficult. I believe in scale. I still think it works. I still think it can work. Now, I don't know to which, how many people does it bring? I mean, I've run PI planning sessions with 2,000 plus people. I can tell you that it didn't work great, right? But it was eye-opening the amount of data we were able to source based upon the levels of complexity that you're asking people to work. So I think that's the thing when we talk about pride. Are we willing to look in the mirror reflectively to say our pride is getting in the way of us making the decisions needed without making the decision an individual one? Are we looking as a whole what we need to do as an organization to move, whether it's agile, waterfall, whatever, right? Like,
Right.
what are we doing to make changes that are not just financial decisions, right? Hey, you got to reduce headcount 38% because you're not capitalizing enough of your spend. Okay, well, that's because people are putting their time in wrong, or the timesheet system is so complex and antiquated, it doesn't work well to serve that need. As an example, right? Is pride getting in the way of us making real change? I think
think you're
that's
right.
where scale gets stifled.
I think you're right. And I think bootstrapping on pride, the salesman's pride when it comes to, so I've been reading a lot about psychology and specifically around language, the language of cults and cult leaders and malignant Pied Pipers. And maybe we go about this the wrong way. Maybe we should think about, and this is going to sound terrible, but I really don't care. Murman comes to me and says, "Hey Jay, I want to hire you to run an agile transformation." I look at him and I say, "Okay, Murman," and we talk, we have a conversation about what he's looking to do, how big his enterprise is, and then I stop and I say, "No, it's not for you." What's going to be your reaction? What do you mean it's not for me? We're a Fortune 50 company. It's not for you. Well, what do you mean it's not for you? Because you're going to have to do this, and you're going to not want to do that. And I'm telling you, you're going to need to do this, and you're not going to want to do that either. And how about this? You're not going to want to do that either. It's not for you. So maybe, and I'm thinking out loud, and maybe I'm taking us down a rabbit hole, but maybe our own pride of wanting to be wanting to deliver what the customer says they want and not what they really need. Maybe we should have done some reverse psychology and force them to say, no, if you're going to sign at this dotted line, it's going to be ugly.
Well,
Mr., Mrs., man, and it's not going to be fun at certain points, but it'll get you where you need to go. And maybe we maybe our own pride of closing the sale, of having the notch on the belt or the feather in the cap, prevented us from maybe we didn't honestly sell how uncomfortable this was going to be.
To quote the client, when I had this specific situation at an old firm, when they said we want to launch X number of teams, and the number of teams was a ridiculous amount, like Leff's number of people in a PI planning is not that far off from what I've experienced and trained and such. As I said, that is an absolutely terrible idea and it will not go well. You should not do that. And the client said to our managing director, if that's true, well, you all should bow out and I'll find another consultancy that will do it this way. To which the MD said, yes, sir, we'll happily do this for you. Chris will do this, right? Like
I get it.
But that again, that that is
And I think everybody's blameless in that situation,
no,
right?
no, no,
I
no,
think,
no.
but I mean,
Yeah.
I think if I'm being a little bit gracious, right? I think it's the customer had obviously they thought they know what they needed, right? I have grace to the managing director because again, they're trying to be successful in their own way. You're
Right.
trying to be successful, and you saw the landmines coming, right? So no, everybody is without fault, but everybody is with fault if that makes any sense, right? But I don't know. I mean, this is a much bigger problem than we're going to solve in a podcast, but how do you get people to a point of safety where they can say, no, this is a terrible idea?
So before we get off where it first originated, I actually wanted to take an even further step back into the past. If I could throw something by you all to see what you think. For me, the original pride came from, I mean, again, the Agile community used to be the Rebel Alliance, right? Like we used to refer to ourselves as the Rebel Alliance, like of the IT community, right? At one point in time, we were the renegades, like fighting back against whoever you say the enemy was, right? Well, as we have seen through the magic, air quotes, magic of Disney the last 3 years since COVID started, like we've peeked under the hood of the Rebel Alliance when they actually win and they have to be in control. Turns out they're not good at being in control at keeping those evil Death Stars and Death Planets from being created. And so like they just keep making bigger ones.
On a long
Like
enough timeline, Murman, the rebels become the Empire. On a long enough timeline, the rebels become the Empire.
All right, all right. Let me tug on that. Let me tug on that string. The minute that we made, so we again, Rebel Alliance became monoculture. I listened to this on a podcast. I was talking with Andy Cleff about this around Thanksgiving time. Of we can't, we cannot say that we are change agents when our livelihood manifests around a culture that everybody says is a good thing. We must have, like we must have a growth mindset, even though most of us still, every single one of you has a fixed mindset about something. And the fact that you're not realizing that is one of your problems. We have created fixed mindsets or a monoculture around those stupid 12 principles, which we argue about whether they should be rewritten or shouldn't be rewritten. Forget all of here's the Agile manifesto for this part of the industry, or Agile 2. I've had plenty of my struggles with those folks and the way that they're perpetuating their ideas. I'll say this, and Jay, you were one of the originals. At least they're trying, right? Like we created a monoculture around this, and we say, don't you dare deviate from these 12 principles. How dare you question the 17 signatories?
Is this where we talk about how Agile became
we
a
have
religion?
created a holy scripture out of the manifesto, and that is the original freaking sin of the Agile industry. And I will die on that hill.
There you go. You nailed it. That's the pride right there. We turned it again. The rebels became the empire. We turned it into a religion. And the other part of my brain is I feel this is a normal part of the human experience, right? Absolutely. Like this happens with everything. So like, for example, so I have a peer at work with, I'm not going to name her because I don't know if she'd be comfortable with me, but she's brilliant. And we bounce this stuff back and forth all the time. And speaking of pride from our own sin, we were talking and she said, one of the things I've come to realize is us as practitioners, because a lot of us who fall into this coaching world are very intellectually curious. We read, we go to classes, we get educated, like we're always chasing something. And she said, do you think that maybe not only have we overeducated ourselves, right? And overtrained ourselves, we have so thoroughly convinced ourselves that this is the ideal, perfect world that we need to get to, that we almost sometimes shoot ourselves in the foot trying to convince people that, oh, Mr. Leff Inc., this is what you need. This is what you need. This is what you really need. Where and Leff, you've said this, and I quote you all the time. We yell at your quote was, "We yell at people because they don't do Agile right." Who's to say they were even doing waterfall right? So how can we even say that Agile is the cure to what ails them when we don't even know how bad they were screwing up traditional project management? And I think we've deluded ourselves into this ideal state, and we keep pitching it where I would posit to say, Murman, you're super enterprise, right? The teams of teams like 2,000 plus. I would, without even knowing who it is or having any information more than what you just said, I would think, and you're probably going to agree with me, 99% of their problems are things that had nothing to do with Agile or Waterfall. They were just bare bones type of being creating a sustainable enterprise that they just oh my God, Murman held up his thumb for those on the audio, and the Zoom actually recognized it, and then my brain is like fucking rebooting. I'm convinced that 99% of your problems have nothing to do with Agile or Waterfall or Lean or Six Sigma or any of that stuff. It has to do with just bare bones. And Agile will say, well, it comes down to visualizing the work and visualize your dependencies. Yes, but we got that from Lean, which got that from Hurt, which got that from all the way back. So
Taylor.
Yeah, and even before Taylor, I found some guy in the Civil War who was doing this stuff. So,
of course you did.
Yeah.
But I want to. So it's interesting, right? And I think we're all kind of alluding to this point: is there might be enough time spent inspecting this or kind of talking about it, but are we truly understanding the problem, right? Or are we too prideful to admit the problem? So when we do these kind of discoveries, right, we're going in, we're going to discover kind of the dysfunction. No one likes their baby called ugly, right? And coaches have a tendency to go, or consultants, whatever, right? Change agents have a tendency to poke at that, right? Because that's how we build our statement of work. And then it's, well, great, you've just pointed out all these things, fix it, right? Go in and fix it now. But can it be fixed? I don't think things like this are fixable. I think you need to change them. And you need to continue to look at the growth opportunity that makes you vulnerable, right? How vulnerable are we willing to be to admit that this is failure, right? And we're not going to put Agile on it. We're not going to put that's what I stop using Agile, right? I don't use that term anymore because I feel like it's a trigger of, right? You brought up the manifesto. I never use the manifesto as a weapon. Ever. I'm like, it's principles, right? They guide us in decision making. They're alignable. They're fence posts. They're guardrails. Whatever you want to call it. It's not a rule book, right? It's not sequential. You don't do 1, 2, 3. Like, it makes no sense to me why that is such a level of abstraction. And maybe that's what Agile is abstraction that people can't. It's not tangible, right?
Maybe.
So you need to make it more like it needs to feel like a product, and we productized it. And is that a prideful thing to make it, again, to lean into greed?
We made ourselves a product.
Right.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that. We're going to unpack this eventually in a different episode. Agile became an abstraction that we then we tried to turn that abstraction to something concrete and something tactile, something physical, where we literally tried to, God in the machine. We tried to build a machine that is God, and then we wondered why everything got screwed. I think that's probably, that's brilliant, because I think you nailed it there. We tried to create, I'm sorry, remember, we tried to create not a lazy heuristic, but that's how humans succeed, right? We succeed by heuristics, right? We copy each other's behavior, we conform, and if I see every time Leff does this, he loses 5 pounds, so I'll be sitting there fucking doing this because I want to lose 5 pounds. But not understanding the logic behind it, right? And you're right, this is an abstract concept that we tried to boil down into a couple of bon mots and some glib statements, and then someone turned around and sold it.
Leff's Instagram is just going to be a video of him doing this
with a 60-pound kettlebell, just doing this.
It's a joke that 3 people will get and find hilarious. Can I ask for one clarification, Leff, on something you said? You said this, and it like hit me like really, really sharply, not in a negative way, but like I just want to make sure that everybody understands when you say it's not fixable, are you saying that like, because I received that as humans are not fixable by a piece of IP that I can write principles and ideas and stuff on the board. Is that what you meant by it's not fixable?
No, I think fixable probably wasn't a good choice of words, but where I was going was some of these problems, one of the coaches that I worked with, she had this great quote, right? Like, you can't rent a transformation. So, to fit, are we truly looking to, and you've heard me say this on other podcasts about, the health, right? So, are we treating symptoms of the problem, or are we trying to cure the ailment that's creating the symptoms? And I think some things are not fixable, right? You do need to cut the limb off, right? It's dead. It's never going to function. It's just being drug around. So is it better to have that removed, or do you want to continue to drag that weight around with you, that anchor, knowing that you can't let it go, right? It's a symbol. It becomes symbolic.
Yeah, and you're right. Fixable, the word makes sense. And when you expand on it, it's what you're basically saying is whatever you have over here is incongruent with what you need over here. Right.
Right.
So you want to talk about pride, right? Let's call ourselves on the carpet. The pride of saying you need to change your culture. We can change your culture. Culture doesn't change. Culture does not change. You cannot, and
People don't change.
I am, this is the whole crux of my book, right? The book I'm writing, you can't change culture. You can't. What you can do is create a new one and then hope to draw people into it. Because the longer a culture is in existence, so let's use Catholicism as an example because it's easy, right? It's been around 2,000 plus years, right? It has a set of rules, a set of mores, a set of behaviors that has been inculcated for generations to the point where whenever they talk about church reform or church modernization, it's dead in the water because you can't change that culture. There is a vested investment and an almost a genetic pass down of behavior and thought and a model, a frame of seeing the world that you're never going to be able to change it, which is why you see splinter religions, which is why you see Methodism, Lutheranism, and the difference between evangelical and what's the word I'm looking for, charismatic churches, right? Like you can't change it because it's back. Here we go, the egregore, right? It becomes a manifestation of itself. You can't change it. All you can do is create a new one that hopes to either outgrow or consume. And they're very prideful to say, yeah, we can just change your culture. Don't worry about it. I need your leaders to go first.
So that's why the monoculture became the monoculture, and then the splintering off into the factions of frameworks happened, which is because we created this. Well, we all believe this one thing. We all believe these 12 things are always true. So therefore, we became philosophers, right? And we started spouting these things. We became and evangelists, like going across the globe, sprinkling like Johnny Appleseed, sprinkling our agile seed everywhere, right? And what turned into is that everybody was like, wait, it's cool here, but we want our own personal set of rules because we don't think that whip limits should ever be broken, and that lead time is the only thing and throughput are the only thing that matters, right? Like we don't need all that extra crap. Like y'all just stay over there. And then there's people are like, it's adorable. You thinking that like it's good for only 12 teams. I have 1,200 teams. And I am smart enough to make it happen. Like, and so all these different factions came up, and because we got really good at philosophy, and we got no better at putting any of this stuff into practice, which is why the best agilists are amazing philosophers, but also know how to put things into practice that actually generate results. And most of us struggle to get even one single result just because of all the systemic issues we have. I don't even know, but like with that, I could consider myself that great as an agilist, right?
I want to kind of pull on what you were both talking about, but culture, right? Interesting. To me, it's a psychological thing. We are ingrained as humans for pattern, consistency. It's you look at the cycle of abuse. We stay in abusive relationships because we know what's coming, right? It's easier to live the life you know than to leave it for the life you don't. So as a corporate culture that has been developed for 20 plus years, let's say, we'll throw an arbitrary number out there, for us to go in, is it a level of pride from us to think that it can change, right? Do we then discount the inability to understand? To me, software has not left enough space for the human brain, right? It's binary. We code, we test, we deploy. It's repeatable though. Is that process, have we reached a point in the human development to be able to inspire the culture we desire based upon repetitive teaching, right? We teach. Do we enable organizations enough time to learn and apply what they just were taught? No. I can say from my experience, absolutely not. I'm like, we need to reserve capacity across our entire program for X amount of percent to apply the learning that we need. Well, no, we can't do that. We have too much demand.
Yeah.
Okay. So are we able to move away, move these big stones out of our way and having to, circumnavigate some of these challenges to inspire culture to evolve into something we desire? Or is it just human nature? We can't do it, right? At scale. And I want to put the period at scale.
I don't think it's that we can't. It becomes a question of diminishing returns. Is the juice worth the squeeze, right? And I think part of, if we're going to put on our philosopher hat again, even though I shouldn't do this, part of the thing with, and I think part of the thing with software in particular is we call it software engineering. It's not software engineering. It's software craftsmanship, because it's more of an art than a science. Engineering implies that there is one way to run power. There's a start and a terminus, a positive and a negative, and maybe there's two, but that's it. Whereas there is a bazillion ways to approach one problem when it comes to software. So maybe if we change the metaphor and look at it more of it's an organic art as opposed to a science, maybe we can poke that to get rid of the pride thing, like thou must do it this way. And
yes.
I worked with a coach. One of the funniest things he ever said is he said, I think we need a healthy dose of filthy right now. And I said, well, what is filthy? And he wrote on the whiteboard, FILTI. And I said, okay, so what is filthy? And he goes, fuck it, let's try it. And I thought that was brilliant. He said, well, just fuck it, let's try it. Like, we have to acknowledge that we're going to try some things and they're going to work amazing. And then we're going to try some things that they're not going to work. And we should be skeptical of both and just give it a go. And I think back to the prideful part, I can fix this. Hire me and I can help you do it. And it's not bad. Again, it's not bad, right? It's not broken. It's incongruent with expectation. But we walk in and we're prideful, and the company is, oh, we can change. We can do the Agile thing. I've been to a conference. I've read this book. I think we can do this. And, we're all lying to ourselves, right? Yeah. We're all lying to ourselves. We're lying to each other. We hope we believe each other. And
you just said something so brilliant about the art in something that is ones and zeros. And yet there are people, some of them created frameworks, and I'm not going to say names, but you know who you are, that have said that we're basing all of this around science, that if we just use science and how we build software, that this data and these practices and these principles and these activities that we run, it's going to result in better things because science says it will. And Jay, what you just said contradicts that almost on its face.
So I'm going to make a statement, but then I want to hear what Leff says. Leff thinks, I don't think science is wrong. We're using the wrong science. We're using engineering. We should, and the hard sciences, we should be using biology, sociology, philosophy, the humanities.
And that's science.
It's science,
but
right. It's more of the living thing, the organism, inside the organization, as opposed to, to your point, if I just do these things, the ones and zeros and the left and the tabs, not spaces, it'll all work. Leff, what do you think? You were grinning a couple times.
We just recorded me saying the words, you're right, Jay. So take that.
Oh, I'll take it. I think you're wrong, but on the second listen, we're going to realize you're wrong. But what do you think, Leff?
I wholeheartedly agree. I think I use science quite a bit in my world. So I think experimentation is an abused term that is poorly executed because of culture. right? For whatever reason, the data that we get on a daily basis, we're not, in my opinion, is not being utilized in the way that doesn't create a weapon, a bullet, something to arm ourselves to shoot back, right? Like the CYA email, the off-color, Teams message, the PowerPoint deck, right? Like it's all for what? So, you kicked us off, Chris, talking about value, right? And do we spend enough time thinking about the value of the people to inspire the revolution that's needed to change culturally, right? And the world is a playground of learning. If we see it every day, and you brought up Catholicism, right? Institutionalized a way. You don't see deviation from, and I'm just saying Catholicism because it was brought up, but you could say this about a lot of religions, if not all of them. You could say this about politics. You could say this about it's human nature. And the fact that we, in my opinion, continue to ignore and put out this garbage from, and again, whoever's in HR, I'm sorry, but I get
that's where I think that's the one part I'm going to push back on, Leff, is that I don't know that, though I've said for years that value is one of the hardest words to define because it all means something different in an organization, whether you're talking about a product or a service or people in general, right? I don't think we don't value people. I think we don't agree on how to value people. And because it's various for an organization, and also HR is very scared about getting sued for anything, shape, or form, and will stop us from doing anything cool and fun, like, I don't know, have an accurate job description online, whatever. Anyways, I think that we're not terrible at valuing people. I think we're terrible at agreeing on how to value people. Just like we don't disagree that some of our government in this country should be helping people. We absolutely disagree on how it should be helping people. And that's where we come to disagreement.
But that goes back to the whole point about you said, well, we can philosophize, but we can't put the rubber on the road. There's that old saying that losers talk strategy, winners talk logistics. Right? Like, and when you look at, I don't know if anybody saw Napoleon, Ridley Scott, he didn't shoot cannonballs at the pyramids. Come on, right? Suspension of disbelief and all that. There were no cannonballs shot at the pyramids.
I don't care if it actually happened or not. It was a good movie.
And that's what he said. He said in the interview, he's like, I don't care. It looked cool. And I forgot where I was going with that because we were talking about
you were talking about Napoleon and strategy.
Oh, yeah. It's strategy and logistics, right? Like Napoleon understood that an army crawls on its belly. Right. And supply lines. Right. And you need to keep supply lines going. The same thing with World War II. And there is a point for the philosophizing and the strategery. But at the end of the day, we do need to spend more time talking about the actual nuts and bolts, the grimy, roll up your sleeves. Right. Like get in the kitchen and here we go, Leff. Make the mirepoix. Yeah. Somebody's got to make the mirepoix. You don't want to do it, but somebody's got to do it.
But it's the base. Right. And so that falls perfectly into what I was thinking around morals, right? When we walk into the doors of work, what happens that we need to think about how we value people? That statement, Chris, is insane to me, that we don't know how to value people. Are you kidding me? We've been raised our whole life, the golden rule, treat others as you would, I struggle with that comment, not from you, just as a general statement with companies. It's like, this should not be hard to figure out. What you said makes more sense is we have to figure out how we're going to be litigated. Then we have to tone down and mute, right? And make it anemic of how we treat people because we have to treat everyone the same. And I'm not saying there needs to be like special treat. The world is weird now. There's lots of weirdness, right? Yeah. From when we started, right? It was very, you went to work, you worked a set amount of time, you left work, right? You weren't bothered usually unless there was an emergency, but we didn't have all this electronics we're overstimulated constantly. We are an impatient organization of people now that are constantly trying to do more, which is crazy. We don't do enough for each other at work. And when we try, it feels weird, right? It doesn't feel comfortable. I'm not like, oh, I want to
That
break. I want to sit
yeah.
down at dinner and have a conversation. I don't want everyone on their phone. I feel the same way at work. I don't want to be distracted. I want to have a meaningful conversation about things we need to do and then talk about accountability. What happens if we don't do them? It's not you're going to lose your job. It's going to be what are you accountable for, right? What are you committing to? We use these words and they should have deeper meaning, right? Commitment. When we talk about commitment
Right.
every 2 weeks, what are you committing for your sprint? Is pride getting in the way that you're going to overcommit because you want the optics of looking like a
Absolutely.
superstar, right? So all this stuff, I don't think we've unraveled the human component enough to be able to talk about pride, right? What should we be proud of? Proud is an amazing motivator. It keeps you engaged more so than financial gain. Why can't we focus on pride that way, right? Why is pride a sin when we talk about it as opposed to a superpower or a gift? And I'm not trying to
Yeah.
be weird and
No, no,
Oh,
coach.
no,
you're
no, no,
right.
no,
It's
no.
we should lean into it. We should lean
You're
into the positive aspect of it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that what you're and this is a good way to transition. I want to say one thing, but you're transitioning to like, well, what are some things that we can do? Like you posed a great way, which is like, can we not view pride as a sin? Can we turn pride into our friend? And so think about that just a second. But I want to add this, like going to what you said about people and pride and trying to find like the wrong science and practices to fix human nature because human nature doesn't change. Like systems of people don't change. I will say though that something that I heard about, it wasn't specifically, agile transformation, but the word transformation, I was listening to an Adam Grant podcast, and I heard that like people talking about changing the culture, and they realize that culture will never change. We just said that, right? What they said is the way that you can is to get a small enough container of people that can be carved off, and then you just change the structures around the people. They don't change. You just
And
change
that
the
grows.
structures and
And
what
that
they do,
grows.
right?
Yeah.
Which is where all these practices come into place. And so I just think that again, if we followed the idea of what does psychology say about trying to keep people into a right size meeting of less than 15 minutes where we talk about actual productive stuff and learn something new, right? Like, what does human psychology say about that? Would you still facilitate it that way after you learned about what psychology says about these agile practices?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyways, I think that's very, very true. And we must start to see these things as, yeah, it's negative that our pride has really gotten in the way, but I think that let me kick this off. As we're thinking about what could we do, there's this theme of humility, right? So I was thinking about what is the antithesis of all these sins, right? Like, we'll get to them all, but I was thinking that the antithesis or the cure for pride is humility, because um when you don't put yourself first, when you don't put your ideas first, when you say, hey, we used to work for small boutique consultancies that would say, I'm sorry, client, we're not ready to take your money right now. I remember the company that Leff and I used to work for, we actually turned clients down at one point in time. And then money became so important that we couldn't ever say no to anybody if they wanted to pay us to do something. Like humility is actually, I don't think I'm right. I know I'm not right. I'm not sure how to fit. I've got some ideas and I'm happy to try some ideas, but that is not, I know how to solve your problem. We're about to get to an election year this year, and you're going to hear a bunch of people say our
Oh,
country is broken and I'm the only person to solve it. That's what every single person says, and not a one of them can actually fulfill it. But what do we all have to say it, right? Instead of saying that, can we say, I'm not sure, but I'm willing to experiment? Am I willing to take lesser of a rate so that I can show my value? Am I willing to not be considered an enterprise agile coach and just be a program level or a team level, just so that I can say, hey, I just want to help things be successful and I'm willing to work some, like, what does humility tell you all about how we
So
can fix this problem with pride?
So when you said, "Oh, well, how do we?" And you and Leff both said, "How do we turn the pride into? How do we lean on the positive?" And I was kind of racking my brain for a second on, okay, well, how do I turn it into a positive? I think, based upon what you just said, the most powerful use of our own pride is when you are comfortable in making the statement, "I'm not too proud to admit that I was wrong. I'm not too proud to admit that maybe this isn't working. I'm not too proud to admit that maybe there is a different way." So there's the positive use of pride. You're so proud of yourself that you can feel comfortable saying, "Yeah, you know what? Maybe we thought it was purple and it was really orange." Okay. Lean into that, right? And to Leff's point, right? I mean, again, I've been reading a lot of stuff about like malignant Pied Pipers, and there's ways you can. I mean, if you really wanted to manipulate people, you can find a way to manipulate a transformation into being work, but into being successful. But that's going to take years off your life, and
Sure.
you're going to get your own circle of hell next to Dick Cheney and Henry Kissinger. But there is something to be said to lean into people's pride. Right? Like lean into, hey, look, we lose that, to your point, we lose that message. When I come around the corner and Leff is at the client I'm working at, and I say, "Look, man, I really want you to be successful. I really want you to be successful. And I think this is the way we do it, but I'm not sure because I don't know. How do we find a way to make this work?" I mean, the messaging, right? The words you use of, if you lean into someone's pride and say, "Look, I just want you to be successful. I want you to be happy and not go home and work, I don't want you to work 12 hours a day. I don't want you to be pissed off 60 hours a week. I don't want you to be answering emails on the beach on a Sunday." Maybe there's that's a lever we can pull, maybe.
Yeah, agreed. So to yes, and I will say this, if you want to run an experiment on pride and reflection, I had this done to me and I started doing it for myself, and it was revolutionary for me. Record yourself in meetings and listen to it back. Record your leadership in meetings and play it back to them. It's radical, right? And I'm a big fan of public shaming. When I say that, it's do you feel comfortable what you just listened to, for everybody? And it's interesting to learn how people kind of show up when they hear themselves, right? I used to hate listening to myself. I'm still not a huge fan, or watching myself coming like on a podcast, but I had a mentor that he would record me. And fortunately, he worked with me, who would record me. And I'd be like, wow, I do come across very direct, or I have like a bit of a sharpness to me, or my facial expression comes across extremely unhappy. Right. So it was weird, or the ums or the ands, or I use I a lot. There was just a lot that I wasn't prepared to hear. And I had to really step to the side and absorb it and say, well, if I want people to change around me, what do I need to change to get others to, so again, I'm a simple thinker. I think of things in a very simple way, and human interaction is the best teacher, in my opinion. Go out in public and try some of this stuff. Say, "Hey, I love your shirt," and put a smile on somebody's face. It costs nothing, right? I'm not saying to pick a fight with people, but there are ways to experiment without having to be paid to do it. And I think we probably don't do enough exploration, or use the daily routine of life to teach us how to interact with people differently, right? If you scream and yell at your kids all day, your kids are going to be intense. There's going to be a level of intensity that they're used to. So they expect it, right?
They're going to be anxious, and then they're going to turn around and do that to other people. They're going to scream and yell down pay it forward. Yeah.
God, how did I get into a counseling session about my
That's my fault. It's
Tell me
my
about
fault.
your
No.
Tell me about your mother.
This is life.
Yeah. But see, that's exploration of humility. Like Jay says he never listens to our pods, because he listening to himself. He gets I make myself listen to myself just so I can hear all the ramblings. Like I ramble every single podcast. I say twice as many words that are needed. I got told in a meeting, they're like, "Chris, you're very direct." And I said, I had no idea I came across that way. I literally I thought I was laid back and fun. I always love being fun. And so I thought that's what I came across. Nope, I am direct and I look you right. I look through you, like into your soul, someone said. Now, they weren't necessarily beating me up for it, but they were like, hey, how's Chris going to react when we tell him this? Uh, it like getting feedback, having someone watch you coach, uh, like it's kind of where we all need to go. Like if you haven't had coaching, if you've not had a professional coach or a life coach impart into your life, all they're doing is holding up a mirror to you, person.
Right, right.
Like,
And
and
Leff's
if you
approach is
can't
you do
look
it
in
for
the
free.
mirror, if you can't look in the mirror, like you got a pride problem.
I am going to admit, I'm going to go back and watch some of the recordings of some of the work stuff that I've been on because now I'm genuinely curious. And I do listen to some of our podcasts. I'm the same way like you, Murman. I go back and listen to certain episodes. I'm like, okay, I rambled there. I went too far down the left. My God, how did I not get muted?
Self-hate is real.
Yeah, but there is part of that. But also, Leff made a really interesting point, right? And to your point, nobody likes feedback. Nobody likes feedback, and here's why. When I offer you feedback, it says more about me than it does about you. It says it's my perception of your behavior, what I heard that you said, what I saw that you did, but it's through my lens. Where when you're watching a recording, right, of a giant Teams meeting of 5 people, well, it's not giant, but a meeting full of people, there's no lens on that. It's just here is what actually was said. Here's what your face looked like. Shit, maybe we all need to write the book. That's the key. It's remove the frame. Remove your own frame. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's oh my God, I really did come across. Yeah, man, now I gotta be thinking. There are definitely some meetings I came across a little bit too much Ridley Scott's dramatically incorrect Napoleon, where I was trying to come across like God, I don't know what I was trying to do, but I came across like Napoleon. That wasn't good.
Yeah,
I
and I
figured
think
you'd either come back. Yeah, I figured you'd be like a combination of like Sam Bankman-Fried on the stand and the Unabomber.
That's probably because they both have goofy hair, so that's the only thing it doesn't work. But
No, but you speak at a level that is above most human beings. I can't imagine everybody like
eh,
listening to you go like thinking but it's just because you're so damn smart.
I'm not going to go that far. I definitely lose the room, but I can see the SBF thing where he's done on Adderall on the stand and going 8,000 miles an hour in the wrong direction, like that. I can see in myself. I'm not going to lie. Um, Ted Kaczynski's manifesto, it makes a lot of sense at the beginning where he talks about what technology is doing to us. But then you like turn the page and he's like, so we need to start blowing people up. And you're like, wait a minute. Did I lose half the book somewhere? Like, how do we get to this? Like
This
yeah.
see
And now we've gone off down.
No, everybody see now everybody else in the podcast has learned that one of my favorite facts about Jay is that Jay for years has been saying, Ted Kaczynski did have some decent ideas. And it's not to say that Jay is psycho. Ted Kaczynski has some challenges in life, and that's what let him do what he did. But it's one of my favorite facts about Jay. So anytime I can tee him up to do that.
Great. Not just expose myself. I'm officially unhireable now. Yep.
but I think
You're not the craziest member of your family, Jay. Not by a long shot.
You know what? It's one of the things I love about this group of people is the willingness to share, right? Even when it's not comfortable. And I think that goes back to your feedback comment, Jay. And I feel like I'm just kind of weaving us around different places. But when we receive feedback, does it matter? Well, to me, it matters that you respect that person. But how quickly we stop respecting that person's opinion if we don't appreciate the feedback the way it's delivered. So you're kind of in conflict. But to me, that's a personal development thing. It takes repetition and it takes people willing to provide feedback for you to get used to absorbing it and then deciding what to do with it, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to just getting pissed off by it. But I challenge, yeah, real quick. I challenge all of us, as well as all the listeners, to do the recording thing. I would love to hear if people try it, if it provides them some insight to a blind spot or a gap in their thinking that they didn't account for, right? Where they couldn't hear that person's feedback that was telling them, but when they saw it happening, they were able to acknowledge it differently, right? I hear lots of things all the time, especially about the way I emote. right? I just have a very stern look. Everyone's like, you always look so pissed off. And I'm like, I'm not a mean person. I'm not angry, right? Like I'm not out to kill people. So, but it was interesting. And when I started to look, I was like, wow. And there's a difference when you smile or have more of a pleasant demeanor. You can get your point across without looking soft or, kind of squishy, or you can be, to me, that's the way I was raised. You had a very stern look. Your point was taken differently. So I think that's also something is, are you approachable? Is pride and fear holding you back from being present in a way that you want as opposed to the way that you know? So there's so much here that I geek out on the psychology of organizations, and I think they all have their own psychology about them as well. And maybe that's part of it is what sins are within the organization that become part of the culture, part of the psychology of how we run the organization, and can you truly fix them, right, without going on Prozac? Or do we all need to just take Prozac or an antidepressant to make us feel more balanced?
There's a whole different episode we could do here on the idea of an organization's culture as a fully formed construct. If we could put the culture on the couch and say, tell me about your mother, right? What would the, like you said, the pride, the sins, the neuroses, the anxieties of that culture? If we, man, maybe Jesus, I think we stumbled on something.
Leff also he also just described the plot of the movie Equilibrium. So I like let's
unintentionally.
That was
I didn't even see it.
Equilibrium. No. That's Taye Diggs and what's his name?
Taye Diggs and Christian Bale.
Yes. Same time as The Matrix, arguably just as good, if not better. Moving along. But I think there is something there, though. If we could, turn the egregore around, right? The cultural egregore, put that thing on the couch and ask it about its mother and ask it about its anxieties. Maybe that's the key, is to understand your we use this term systems thinking, which I'm not really a fan of, but understanding what we're talking of in the aggregate to say, well, okay, it's going to react this way. This is how we want to get around it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think
we've beaten this one. Yeah.
It's clear, like we have struck some gold here. I think we'll call it on pride for now. What I'm curious of to the audience is what do you feel like we missed? Right? Is there a kind of an original pride in the community that you experience that feels at the heart of why pride became a struggle for us? How it manifests, what you think we should do. If anybody has any other tips on how you've gotten feedback and welcomed it, because again, it's not about saying I want feedback. It's I'm giving you permission. Leff and Jay, I gave you all this years ago. You get permission to tell me things that I may not like hearing because it'll make me better. That is the key to getting rid of every single piece of pride that we have and a problem believing a religious scripture that was never intended to be such. On behalf of Jay Hrcsko, Andrew Leff, I am Chris Murman. Remember Patreon, remember Discord. Please join us in Discord and feel free to, if anything, we have so little pride that we love being made fun of. So jump on, tell us where we messed up, tell us where we were wrong. But more sins are coming, and we'd love to know what you think of it. So this is Agile Uprising signing off.
Cheers.
Cheers.